Hey guys, it's NT Reads, and as you can see by the video title, today I'll be talking about a very spooky Ikea. I've gotten requests to talk about books I actually like, so spoiler alert, don't expect any angry rants in this video. Horrorstor by Grady Hendrix is a comedy horror novel that was published in 2014 by Quirk Books. If his name sounds familiar, Hendrix also wrote the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which I will definitely be reading soon. If you like the podcast Welcome to Night Vale, then you'll definitely like Horrorstor. They have the same kind of weird, surreal vibes with a sharp wit to them, so if you like one, you'll probably like the other. As I mentioned before, Horrorstor is about a haunted Ikea, which is called Orsk in this novel, which is kind of funny because Ikea also exists in this world. The book is super funny and genuinely creepy at times, although it can be a little cheesy. It's a shorter book, so it's an easy read if you're looking to break through a reading slump. If you want to avoid spoilers and read the book for yourself, now's your time to click away. I genuinely recommend this book, so if you're interested in it at all, I recommend clicking away and coming back to this video later. With that out of the way, let's jump right in. The chapters open with these product description images that get progressively weirder throughout the book, and I was always delighted to see them. It kind of just adds a cool touch. In addition to the cover, which I haven't talked about really, that just looks like a catalog, this book is just vibes. I really enjoy it. The furniture item that's pictured in like these little blurbs is also generally related to the chapter in some way, which I think is fun, and I really like this stuff that helps build up the atmosphere. The book opens with Amy, the main character, arriving at Orsk to start her shift. There's some chaos because the employee card reader doesn't work, so they can't open the store, and customers are already piling in, so it's just crazy. Orsk was the all-American furniture superstore in Scandinavian drag, offering well-designed lifestyles at below IKEA prices, and its forward-thinking slogan promised a better life for the everyone. Especially for Orsk shareholders, who trekked to company headquarters in Milwaukee, Wisconsin every year to hear how their chain of IKEA knockoff stores was earning big returns. Orsk promised customers the everything they needed in the every phase of their lives, from ballsack, oh my god, I'm saying this out loud for the first time, ballsack, that can't be how that's, ballsack cradles to Goudaval rocking chairs. The only thing it didn't offer was coffins. Yet. I just wanted to point out again that this book directly references that IKEA also exists, which somehow just makes it so funny to me. Anyway, back to the plot. Amy, throughout the chaos, is able to meet up with her coworker Matt, who's like this super hipster guy. "Don't be in such a hurry," Matt said, trying to suck a strand of cheese off the mass of hair surrounding his mouth. "There's nothing waiting inside but retail slavery, endless exploitation, and personal subjugation to the whims of our corporate overlords." This book is very snarky about how terrible retail and corporate work in general is, and I'm here for it. Amy sees her boss, Basil, and tries to avoid him. We're told that Amy transferred from another store to this one recently, but she wants to go back to the original store, and she doesn't really get along with Basil, so she's trying to avoid him until her transfer goes through so she doesn't, piss him off and lose her job or something before that. This book has a problem with show don't tell and can be heavy on the exposition, especially at the beginning, which can bog the narrative down. A lot of this stuff with Amy is just info dumped on the reader. Amy had given this speech so many times, she was barely paying attention. Instead, she was thinking about Basil and all the reasons she disliked him. It wasn't because he was 3 years younger and 5 promotions ahead of her, and it wasn't that he was skinny and geeky, all shoulder blades and elbows, a taller Urkel from Family Matters, and it wasn't the endless stream of phony inspirational corporate speak that flowed out of him all day long. No. Amy's problem with Basil was that he acted like he felt sorry for her, like she was his charity case, like she required extra attention, and that made her want to punch him in the face. This is kind of an info dump, but I'm giving it a pass because it's funny. I appreciate that Basil's physical description also told us something about his personality, which is something I always enjoy in writing when you're describing how a character looks. The card reader is fixed, and Amy's finally able to get inside to the showroom, where she has to show some new trainees around the store. She tells them about the bright and shining path, which is the route customers are supposed to take through the store, and it keeps them from backtracking or wandering around, which is genuinely how IKEAs are structured. Look it up, it's kind of creepy. She runs into Matt again, who is dealing with a display sofa that is literally covered in shit. Amy says a customer must have changed a diaper on it, but Matt says it was already like that when they opened, which is suspicious. Exactly, Amy said, which is why every info post is equipped with Orsk-approved, non-toxic, hypoallergenic air freshener, because when some lady drops her mutant baby's drippy diaper behind a sofa, you don't want your shop to smell like her beautiful overachiever's butt for the rest of your shift. I think this is a prime example of how the book borders on cheesiness at times. I think this is a good example of how a joke can be pushed a little too far. Less is more with comedy for me, and I think this was just a little too heavy-handed. Anyway, Amy continues to show the trainees around the store, and they run into Trinity, who works in design. They try to ask her questions about her job, but all she wants to talk about is ghosts because weird things have been happening around the store, which is definitely not suspicious. Trinity then tells Amy that Basil wants to see her in the motivation room, which is like what they call the break room, which I think is hilarious. And the vibe is generally that Amy thinks she's about to get fired. So we cut to chapter 2, and I didn't notice the colors listed in the bottom of like the little image here until I started putting this video together, and some of them are hilarious. You can get this Stritsec storage, Dritsec? Oh my god, how do you say that? You can get this Stritsec storage thing in lime, lemon, flamingo, snow, or night, which is the weirdest choices ever for colors, and I'm just here for it. I love it. Anyway, Amy goes to the motivation room and also runs into Ruth Ann, which is one of her most dedicated coworkers who has worked at Orsk basically forever. And it's described that, like, Ruth Ann doesn't even have, like, a family or friends or really anything going on in her life at all. Like, she basically just lives to work. So Amy is very confused and is worried that Ruth Ann is also going to get fired, which is really bad, and she's just in general freaking out. The more Amy struggled, the faster she sank. Every month she shuffled around less and less money to cover the same number of bills. The hamster wheel kept spinning and spinning and spinning. Sometimes she wanted to let go and find out exactly how far she'd fall if she just stopped fighting. She didn't expect life to be fair, but did it have to be so relentless?
I am never going to financially recover from this.
Basil shows up and Amy starts ranting about how it's okay to fire her, but he can't fire Ruth Ann because that'd be like clubbing a baby seal. And Basil assures her that he's not firing anyone and that he actually called them there to give them a secret assignment. We're 11% over on breakages, and Pat had to notify Regional. He's also tasked me to lead an internal investigation. Pat was general manager of the entire store and Basil's direct superior. He once delivered a baby on a moose, and he paid out of his own pocket for a karaoke DJ at the Christmas party. No one wanted to disappoint Pat. Naturally, Basil continued, I don't want to disappoint him. So as I have been alluding to, weird things have been happening in the store, especially at night, and Basil wants to do a stakeout to figure out why so he can keep corporate, especially manager Pat, happy. There are tons of security cameras, but the store lights power off at 2 a.m. and stay off until 7:30 a.m., so they haven't caught any footage of what's happening. I think the easier solution here is to just keep the lights on instead of keeping employees there overnight, but nobody really brings that up or asks why that's not an option, so whatever. Basil says the stakeout has to be that night because corporate is coming to the store the next morning for some kind of assessment, and he needs to figure out what's happening before then. He only asked Amy and Ruth Ann to do it because he knew they'd say yes. Ruth Ann has nothing better to do, and Amy has to be on her best behavior to get her transfer request put through, so he chose them specifically because he knew that they wouldn't say no. And obviously they both agree. Basil leaves, and Trinity and Matt come into the break room and ask what that was all about, but Amy doesn't tell them specifically because Basil wants to keep it a secret. He doesn't want word to get out about all this crazy shit happening, even though everybody kind of already knows. Chapter 3. They're an hour into the stakeout, and Amy is hiding in the bathroom because Basil won't stop asking and talking about work, which is driving her crazy, and I totally get it. Eventually, Amy returns to the break room, and we get some more Ikea snark. Next to the door was a giant plastic bucket full of magic tools. The geniuses in Milwaukee designed their furniture to be incompatible with ordinary household tools. Orsk products could be assembled only with the proprietary Orsk magic tool. The small L-shaped wrench was famously easy to lose, so the store gave them away by the bucketful, and employees were required to carry one at all times. Amy had one in her pocket right now, and another dozen rolling around her junk drawer at home. She glanced around the room. Over on the wall was a large banner that read, "The hard work makes Orsk a family, and the hard work is free." The completely fake, slightly stilted Euro phrasing was part of Orsk's fake IKEA act, and Amy couldn't decide if it was slightly annoying or totally offensive. In her opinion, nothing was worse than a store that pretended to be something it was not. Damn! Basil keeps asking Amy about work, and they talk about a management test that Amy failed by 2 points, which is embarrassing because it's supposed to be super easy. Basil says he'll help her study for it, and she can take it again in 6 months, which is a crazy long time for a test, whatever. But Amy isn't really interested in all that. To her, her job is just her job, and she doesn't have any real ambition of rising the ranks of Orsk, which I can totally relate with. The only reason I work is because I have bills to pay. I don't wake up dreaming to go to work every day, and I think that's fine. Basil sort of argues with her about it, and Amy escapes back to the bathroom, where she finds fresh graffiti on the walls that wasn't there before. In addition to the diagrams for the chapter openings, the book also has other images inserted throughout, which I think is a nice touch. Amy isn't sure what the beehive is, but she knows that the graffiti wasn't there the last time she was in the bathroom, so she leaves to go tell Basil. Before she can get back to the break room, she hears a slamming noise and goes to investigate and finds an exterior door has been propped open, which is not good. She sees her car in the parking lot and considers just going home and ditching the whole thing, which she should have. Spoiler alert. But she decides to go back inside and talk to Basil about everything. Basil is super serious about the potential security breach and plans another patrol to go around the showroom. He wants them to split up, and we all already know how well that usually goes. Chapter 4. Amy was able to convince Basil she should stick with Ruth Ann, so the two start their patrol together. Amy wants to bitch about Basil, but Ruth Ann really doesn't want to hear anything about it. She tells Amy that not everyone who disagrees with her on something is a bad person, which I think is a lesson we could all stand to learn. Conversations like this were frustrating because what could Amy say? Either she could agree that St. Basil needed a church named after him, or she could reply with some sarcastic remark that would make her seem petty. She'd had a lousy life too, growing up in a crappy trailer with a mom whose idea of family time was playing hide the vodka. But if she brought that up now, it would look like she was trying to compete with Basil, and there was no way she could win a Who's Got It Worse contest, not with someone who grew up black in East Cleveland. Yeah, sorry Amy, you're definitely not gonna win that one. Ruth Ann, who is a cashier, tells Amy she never goes out on the showroom floor because she got lost one time and it really freaked her out. Amy tells her it's not so bad, and they start their patrol around the showroom floor, and they don't really see anything except a rat, which is gross, but not really all that special. What about that closet, she whispered. Do you think we should check behind that door? You think someone's hiding in there? The color drained from Ruth Ann's face. Maybe. Amy walked over and yanked on the knob. Ah! Ruth Ann squeaked prematurely. It's fake, Amy said, rattling the door, and the display wall shook. These doors to nowhere are all over the store. You really don't ever leave the checkout area, do you? Okay, tell me there's not something spooky about a big-ass furniture store at night that has fake doors and windows and is essentially built like a maze. It reminds me of the back rooms in the best way possible. Amy and Ruth Ann continue their patrol and find Matt and Trinity getting down and dirty in one of the display beds, which is gross and so unexpected. I was shocked when this happened. Matt assures them that they aren't the intruders who've been fucking up the store at night. They're just there to fuck each other, I guess.
Excuse me, what?
Oh, and for one other reason. He wouldn't understand. We're here to conduct a complete parapsychological investigation. Amy and Ruth Ann just stared at her. In layman's terms, Matt explained, we're ghost hunting. This place is teeming with potential paranormal energy, so we brought the necessary equipment to measure it. He gestured to 4 enormous black gear bags lying beside the bed. MEL detectors, infrared cameras, voice-activated recorders for EVP, the works. So the door Amy found propped open earlier was actually from Matt and Trinity bringing all their equipment in, so that's one mystery solved. We then get some more snark that had me absolutely rolling. Because you know what those jerks on Haunted Investigations, Paranormal Patrol, Strike Force, Ghosts, and Ghost Detectives never have, Trinity asked? Footage. They never actually get footage of a ghost. It's all just a bunch of fat dudes walking around dark houses going, hello? Hello? I know you're here. I can feel your presence. Give me a sign. Then they pretend to hear something and whip the camera around. Did you see that? Matt imitated. Did you hear that? Oh my god, it said help me.
Whoa.
What was that?
What's up?
Do you keep hearing that?
Play it again, play it again.
Sure they go.
I just got the chills. Oh.
Let go of yourself. Let go of your hand. Let go of your neck.
I just want everybody to calm down right now.
Dude, I can't. The author really said fuck Zach Baggins and all those other losers. Amy says ghosts don't exist, and Trinity tells her that there used to be a spooky old prison there before Orsk was built, so there's definitely ghosts around, even though she's never personally seen one. She says that Matt has, but he doesn't really want to talk about it, which is suspicious. Instead of continuing the patrol, Ruth Ann goes with Trinity to help her set up some EMF detectors, and Matt stays with Amy. Chapter 5. Matt talks about the equipment as he and Amy set it up. Matt has named all his detectors after TV ghost hunters, and he shit-talks some of them. They jump to conclusions. They use the word energy without actually knowing what it means. They pretend to understand physics when they clearly don't even know how their own equipment works. They call themselves scientists, but beat up the scientific method and drag it through the mud. And worst of all, they're terrible at being on TV. As a scientist myself, like yes, that's literally my day job, I can't tell you how hilarious yet irritating it is to hear the absolute nonsense that ghost hunters blab about on their shows. It's entertaining, but it also pisses me off. As Amy and Matt keep talking, Amy realizes something. It suddenly dawned on Amy. You don't believe in ghosts, she said, at all. Matt powered up his camera. I believe a ghost is a subjective experience. It doesn't have an objective reality. It exists solely in the perception of the people who see it. Meaning ghosts aren't real? That's not what I said. Come on, let's roll tape. It's like outtakes from Child's Play in here. Okay, so Matt is definitely a Reddit mod. Everything he says has an r/I am very smart vibe, which is so funny. Amy accuses Matt of going along with the ghost thing just to get in Trinity's pants, but he says that what Trinity said about a prison being there is true, and it's very spooky and very real, and ghosts might exist. It was a big deal back in the 19th century. The warden, Josiah Worth, was a total maniac. He believed that nonstop surveillance would cure criminals. The prison was round, with a guardhouse in the center, so that the prisoners, he called them penitents, never knew if they were being watched. Zero privacy. It was called a panopticon. Underneath the cells were 3 sub-basements where the penitents worked. Giant labyrinths full of mindless tasks designed to rewire their brains. He shrugged, just like Orsk. Don't let Basil hear you say that. In case you're wondering, the panopticon is a theoretical prison design that I don't believe has ever been put into practice in real life. The concept is that while it's physically impossible for one guard to observe all the inmates at once, the inmates don't know when they're being watched, so they must act like they're being watched at all times, which forces them to behave. But it's true, Matt protested. Orsk is all about the scripted disorientation. The store wants you to surrender to a programmed shopping experience. The Cuyahoga Panopticon was the same thing. The warden believed he could cure a criminal brain using forced labor, mindless repetition, and total surveillance. This was back when people believed that architecture could be designed to generate a psychological effect. As if spooky Ikea couldn't get any spookier, they had to throw the Panopticon stuff in here too. Like, what the hell? I'm living for this. As they wander around, Amy realizes what's showing on Matt's camera is different from what they see in real life. Like, they're in the home office section, but when they look through the viewfinder, it shows that they're in the kitchen section, which is super disorienting. And Amy is understandably freaked out. She says there must be some kind of camera error, but Matt really kind of acts unconcerned, which was weird. He's really not all that bothered by what's going on. He says, oh, we're either both hallucinating or like something spooky's going on, but whatever. Eventually they're able to navigate their way back to the meeting point with Trinity and Ruth Ann. And then Amy and Ruth Ann head back to the break room to meet up with Basil again because their patrol is supposed to be over. Chapter 6. As soon as they get to the break room, Ruth Ann blabs to Basil about the ghost hunt and tells him everything with zero hesitation when, Matt was like, oh, don't tell Basil, and she just spills it right away. What? Basil asked again. You know how on A&E they've got those ghost hunters, Ruth Ann said? Oh, shoot, they don't want to be on A&E, though. Right, it's Bravo. Anyway, they say this place is built on an old prison, and they've got cameras and microphones and all kinds of electromagnetic detectors, and they're shooting their own little ghost show. It's real cute. We caught them kissing, didn't we, Amy? Well, I'd say they caught them doing a little more than kissing. Basil's pretty pissed off about all of this and wants to confront the wannabe ghost hunters, but then Trinity busts into the break room before he has a chance, and she's screaming, freaking out, claims she saw a ghost, and she even caught it on camera. Matt runs in right after her, and he's freaked out and says it's definitely not a ghost, it's fully just an intruder in the store, and they've got to call the police or do something about it. Basil is furious, Trinity won't stop babbling, and so Matt finally just snaps. Ghosts don't exist, Matt snapped. They've never existed. They didn't exist yesterday, they don't exist today, and they're not going to exist tomorrow. They're made-up bedtime stories for mouth breathers who are scared of dying, and you're too smart to believe in them. His statement hung in the air like something that absolutely, positively could not be taken back. Trinity looked as though she'd been slapped. I mean, Matt said, stammering, I guess they could exist, but I don't think this was one. Yikes. So much for what he said before about, I believe in ghosts, potentially, Oh, no, he doesn't. Undeterred, Trinity shows the group the footage of the supposed ghost. It's straight up just a dude running through the store, and Amy says that she saw him that morning when the store was open. I didn't mention that before. She just saw this random guy just standing there and being weird. Everyone starts arguing again, and Basil cuts them off. He says corporate is coming in the morning, so they need to get their shit together and go find whoever that guy is. They argue about how to best search for him when Trinity says they don't have to because the guy's right there on the cameras. They all saw it. Sticking out from around the side of a jarring shelving unit was a man's leg. All they could see were his pants from the knee down, a bare ankle and a dirty sneaker. While they watched, his leg slipped out of sight behind the jarring. The movement was so startling that Amy took a step back. Everyone looked at Basil. In the face of something so unsettling, they needed a leader. Basil sensed the change and rose to the occasion. I don't know why Basil wasn't already checking the cameras himself while he was in the break room waiting for Ruth Ann and Amy. He would have already known that Matt and Trinity were there because he would have seen them come in, and he would have also seen the other intruder. I don't know why he wasn't looking at the cameras or if they just glitched. And there's a lot of borderline plot hole nonsense with the security cameras, like how I mentioned the lights earlier, and it is kind of annoying. I think the author could have just written that they weren't functioning because of all the spookiness and just added that extra line and this would have cleared up, but it is something that bothered me. Anyway, the group go to confront the intruder when Basil remembers what Amy said about the graffiti in the bathroom, so they stop by the women's restroom, and when they walk inside, it's completely covered in all this spooky-ass writing.
Spooky poopin'. Spooky poopin' at the haunted stall. Nah, you went farting in the ghost toilet.
Which freaks Amy out to the point that she wants to call the police, but Basil refuses because he doesn't want corporate to get involved and, he wants to fix everything himself. He tells Amy that she and Ruth Ann should just wait in the break room while he gets it all handled. As soon as Basil walks away, Amy immediately calls the police, which I'm like, thank God, girl. You have at least one brain cell. She tries to give the officers directions, but they can't really figure out where the store is in a really suspicious, spooky way. Ruth Ann demands Amy to hang up the phone and help Basil find the guy because her job is really all she has and she needs to keep it. No, you've talked plenty tonight. Now it's time for you to listen. The last time I checked, you were 24 years old. 13 and angry is a long way back in your rearview mirror. You need to buckle up because it is time to toe the line and act like a grown-up woman. You don't want to go out on the floor? Tough titty, said the kitty. I don't want to go on the floor either, but having a job is all about doing things you don't want to do. That's why they pay you money for it. Life doesn't care what you want. Other people don't care what you want. All that matters is what you do. And right now, what you're going to do is stand shoulder to shoulder with me and march out that door, find our friends, and help them deal with this situation. Tomorrow you can do whatever the heck you want, but I'm going to keep my job. So get up, put some pepper in your pants, and let's get moving.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, fuck that. There's no job that pays me enough to deal with after-hours spookiness. No fucking thank you. If you think I'm going to fight a ghost on the clock or not, hell no! Amy doesn't really know what to say to all that, so she just agrees to keep patrolling. Chapter 7. Amy and Ruth Ann find Basil and the others and help them find the intruder. Matt whips out a mag light, which is a big-ass flashlight, for defense. Matt marched off toward dining rooms without answering him. You can't beat up a ghost, Trinity called out, going after him, the others following in their wake. You do realize that you're not in control of this situation anymore, Amy said to Basil. I am 100% in control of this situation, Basil said, hurrying to keep up. See, this is the kind of subtle comedy that really shines in this book. I like this style of comedy way more than when the narrative blatantly tells a joke with like the mutant baby stink diaper thing, whatever. They finally find the intruder, and he's clearly just some guy, not a ghost. Basil doesn't really know what to do and shouts at him to come out. Ruth Ann starts to get irritated with how everyone is just fucking around and takes things into her own hands. All at once, Ruth Ann strode past him, approached the bed and raised one end, revealing a man splayed out face down like a starfish. He burst into motion, scuttling away like a bug after its rock had been lifted. Stumbling to his feet, he immediately whacked his head on the edge of the raised bed frame. He had too much momentum to stop, but the collision knocked him off balance. He wove his way across the bright and shining path, caught a splooge, oh my god, he caught a splooge love seat at mid-thigh and went flying over it, head over heels. Oh dear god, why is the love seat called splooge? I didn't even remember this until just now as I'm reading it out of the script. This is too funny. Anyway, they catch the intruder and find out he's a homeless guy named Carl. They ask him how he got inside, and he explains. Same way I do every night, Carl said. I hang out in the cafe until closing, then I go to the bathroom around 9:30 and sit in the stall and pull my feet up on the commode whenever the door opens. Your security guys do a terrible job, by the way. You should find a new company. Wait a minute. If there's a security team, then why aren't they doing the stakeout? Why is Basil doing it? Is it just because he wants to keep the issue under wraps? But wouldn't the security team already know about this? Like with the damaged merchandise? Like, shouldn't they already know? Like, this is a little bit plot holy again for me, and I wish they hadn't mentioned the security team. Carl swears up and down that he's not responsible for the graffiti or broken items or the poop on the bed. He just hangs out there at night to have a safe place to sleep. He promises never to come back again, and Basil makes the group vote on if they should hand him over to the police, which I think is funny that Basil's making them vote instead of just choosing himself. The group agrees to let Carl go as long as he promises never to come back, but then Amy has to admit that she's already called the police, which annoys Basil. He says that he's going to go meet the police in the parking lot and explain everything, so he walks off to go do that. Amy tries to call the police again to tell them not to come, but they're still saying that they're having a hard time finding the place, and they don't really seem to understand what she's saying, which is definitely spooky. The group then fill Carl in about the ghost hunt they're on. Carl noticed that Matt was carrying a video camera. Wait, you guys are ghost hunters? Like on A&E? Would everyone stop talking about A&E, Matt said. There are other channels. They want to be on Bravo, Amy explained to Carl. With the Real Housewives, Ruth Ann added helpfully. But ghosts only haunt houses, Carl said. Everyone knows that. Also, everyone knows that all ghosts are spooky little Victorian children. Sorry, I don't make the rules. The chapter ends with the group deciding to do a seance. Chapter 8. The group prepares for the seance by lighting a ton of candles. They don't want to hold hands, so Matt's genius solution is to handcuff them all together in a circle, which, like, what the fuck? I don't know why he has so many pairs of handcuffs just, like, ready to go, but whatever. They cuff themselves, and Ruth Ann casually drops that the last time she was in handcuffs was back in 1988 when she fought some Hells Angels. The switch to meek cashier lady to badass was sort of like a sharp 180 flip, but I'm here for it, don't get me wrong. Seance goes just as well as you'd think it would, and Trinity gets attacked by a ghost. Trinity's throat gave a final heave, and what Amy saw next was impossible. It looked like she was vomiting underwater. A thick milky liquid hung in front of Trinity's face, an impossible cloud suspended in midair, soft white tendrils unfurling in slow motion. Up until now, we've had explanations for everything spooky that's happened, but this is straight up a ghost, no denying it. Like, no tricks, nothing. This is a ghost. It possesses Carl next, and he says he's the warden. They called it my beehive because it hummed with the sound of industry, Carl continued, his sweat-soaked face earnest. My partners grew fat off the labor of my penitents, but I truly cared for them. I prescribed the toil that purified their souls. Carl, who is now the warden, then goes through each member of the group and describes what horrible punishment he'd give them to solve them of their ailments, but I'll get into that later. Carl then stands up and one of his wrists is free despite not having the handcuff key, like he's just slipped out somehow like Houdini. And he takes this handcuff, like that's dangling, and straight up rips his throat out with it, which is absolutely disgusting. It's a very detailed scene, and I am not going to share it here. Everyone starts freaking out, so Ruth Ann takes over and gets everyone out of the cuffs. She pulls her shirt off and holds it to Carl's neck to stop the bleeding, like as if he didn't, tear out his whole trachea, and Basil walks in right at this moment. He was standing in the center of the bright and shining path, mouth hanging open, looking at a scene from his worst nightmare. Vanilla-scented candles had splashed wax halfway up the walls. Cameras were tipped over. Handcuffs were all over the floor. Ruth Ann was topless except for her bra. Blood was everywhere, and a dead man lay sprawled on a franked dining table. This poor man just wants to figure out what the fuck is going on in his store, and he has to deal with this group of idiots, a dead guy, and a vengeful ghost. Carl croaks out something ominous about the doors being open, because apparently he's not actually dead. Love that for him. Chapter 9. All of the lights shut off because it's 2 a.m. Even the safety lights, which normally stay on, like the exit signs and stuff like that, it's just pitch black, which is so fucking scary to me. The group tries to navigate this big warehouse with just their phone lights, which, yikes, no thanks from me, dog.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
They realize that Carl, Ruth Ann, and Trinity are gone. Well, maybe not Carl. Amy could see the wound pulled across Carl's throat, his blood black in the flashlight beam. His eyes were bulging. One of his eyes had rolled up inside his skull so that only the white was showing while the other stared sightlessly up and to the left. Still grinning, he stood completely motionless. Then Carl raised one hand and beckoned them closer. Oh crap, Amy said. More like fuck that.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
Carl then disappears into a walk-in closet, and Basil doesn't hesitate to follow him because he doesn't really believe Carl is possessed and just thinks he needs medical attention. And even if that were the case, fuck that. I cannot repeat this enough. Fuck all of this. No thank you. After they walk into this weird walk-in closet, it's kind of confusing, like they're kind of going to a hallway. One of the fake doors from before is open, which it shouldn't be because the doors are fake. They don't go anywhere. The glow from the mag light lit up the first few feet of the hall. Its white plastered walls were rank with yellow water stains. Its sturdy floor was unfinished concrete. It stretched for 20 feet before taking a sharp turn to the right.
No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you.
No, seriously, no. No, there's nothing that can convince me to go into the spooky tunnel. Nothing. I will not go in the spooky tunnel. Amy doesn't want to go either, but she also doesn't want to be alone, so she follows Basil and Matt into the tunnel. As they're inside, the police call her again to try to get directions to the store, but her phone dies, which, oh no. Now she sort of has to stick with the group because she no longer has a light, which is horrible. She begs Basil to turn around because it's not safe. Basil hesitated, weighing the choice. Amy knew from taking the shop responsible test that ORSC managers had a responsibility to both store guests and store partners. But what if a manager had to choose one over the other? What was the priority? There was questions the test hadn't posed, and Basil was struggling. Basil doesn't know if he should help Carl or his employees, but I think the choice is obvious. Carl can straight up go fuck himself. There's only a few people I'd go through a spooky tunnel to find, and some random guy I just met isn't going to make the cut. Basil says he wants to look just a little longer and turns a corner, which puts him out of sight. Amy and Matt hear something weird, so they take off running and they just end up getting separated from Basil. The floor starts vibrating ominously as whatever is coming for them starts to get closer. And then all the glass around them starts to shatter, which causes Amy to get separated from Matt, and she's now completely alone in the dark, which, fuck that. As if it couldn't get any worse, she bumps into someone who she can't see, and they promptly attack her. Chapter 10. Amy tries to get away from her attacker, but the room is suddenly full of people. They swarm her and drag her around like a rag doll. People, or things that were shaped like people, thronged around her in a crushing mob. Their muddy clothes suffocated her. The bodies underneath their rags as dead as marble. Her head was filled with their stench. Her bones were chilled by their cold. The hands lifted her up and slammed her down into a chair, knocking the wind out of her in one shocked gasp. Some distant part of her mind recognized it as a Punang high-backed armchair with its cushion removed. A strap was cinched hard around her chest, and when she inhaled it tightened, collapsing her lungs, flattening her ribs, keeping her from drawing enough air to scream. I love that even though she's going through something absolutely horrifying, she still knows her ORSC products. Keep in mind this is all happening in pitch darkness, which just makes it extra double scary for me. Like, I do not like the dark. The warden, who is possessing Carl's body, shows up and tells Amy that this is her punishment. Your madness is a typical case, Josiah said. Your spirit is agitated and restless, and you engage in pointless activity, roaming about in an excitable frenzy to no great effect. His words resonated with something deep inside Amy's mind. She did run around, trying desperately to get somewhere. And what was the point? Was there a point? Nope. No thank you. There doesn't have to be a point to not want to be strapped to a chair by a ghost at a spooky Ikea.
I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
Amy doesn't really have a choice, though. She's already in the chair. She's restrained such that she can't move any part of her body, which is not only painful as she starts to lose circulation, but it's also maddening. Imagine being completely immobilized. Like, she can't even move a fingertip. Nothing. Can't blink her eyes. Like, well, maybe she can blink her eyes, but she really can't move her body at all. And she's just completely immobilized in a dark room, left with nothing but her racing thoughts, which, that sounds like agony to me. The problem was the liars. They said she could do anything she set her mind to. They told her she could shoot for the moon because if she missed, she'd be among the stars. They made movies, tricking her into thinking she could achieve heroic things. All lies. Because she was born to answer phones in call centers, to carry bags to customers' cars, to punch a clock, to measure her life in smoke breaks. To think otherwise was insane. The chair didn't lie to her. The chair cured her of her madness. The chair showed her exactly what she was capable of, and that was nothing.
Jesus Christ.
Good lord, that's depressing. Being stuck in the chair actually becomes comforting to Amy because now she's allowed to just sit there and do nothing instead of being forced to try. As someone dealing with a whole lot of burnout right now, I can kind of see her point, but I'm also ADHD as hell and I cannot sit still. I would rather continue to struggle than to give up completely, especially in a scary ass Ikea. I'm getting out of there, I promise you that. The chapter ends with Amy accepting her fate. Chapter 11. Basil rescues Amy from the chair, and at first she doesn't really want to leave because of her brainwashing. I feel like this is a big redemption moment for Basil because Amy didn't really like him, but he still came back for her. She can't walk because she's lost feelings in her legs and tells Basil to just leave her behind, but he refuses. Amy, who is still sort of brainwashed, tells Basil that the warden is just trying to help them all and she wants to stay in the beehive. Basil doesn't listen to her and finds an office chair to shove her in so he can just push her out of the store. He pushes her all around, but they can't find the exit. They start to hear footsteps coming for them, and Basil tells Amy to save herself no matter what and not to help him. And then they see something genuinely horrifying. They were dressed in loose striped shirts and pants, their heads bowed forward, each man's forehead resting on the back of the neck of the man in front of him. They were standing so close that they looked like a great segmented centipede made of dead flesh. They stopped just a few feet in front of Basil.
Oh, Jesus. I'm done.
No!
Basil tries to put on a brave face and tells the terrifying ghost human centipede, whatever the fuck it is, that it's trespassing on Orsk property, and obviously it swarms him instead of politely going back into the hell closet it came out of. Too bad the managerial manual didn't say anything about dealing with ghosts. Chapter 12. Amy is now alone without a light again, but the ghosts are too busy fucking up Basil to go after her, so she manages to get away. She finds Basil's cell phone and uses it to light her way as she tries to find her way out of the store. Instead, she runs into the spooky-ass treadmill from the chapter opener and someone's being punished. Trinity? Amy whispered. Trinity's wrists were bound with packing tape to the front of the desk. One of her enormous black gear bags, crammed full of something heavy, was strapped over her shoulders. She looked back at Amy, her hair matted with sweat. I saw a ghost, Trinity mumbled. I finally saw a ghost, but he didn't like me. Amy tries to get Trinity free from the treadmill and sees that all of her fingers are broken under the packing tape, which, yikes. Just like with Amy, Trinity is sort of brainwashed and doesn't really want to be taken off the treadmill. Amy forces Trinity to go with her, just like how Basil helped her, and as they walk down the path, Matt calls Basil's phone. He says he's still trying to find Trinity and won't listen when Amy says that she's with Trinity, and Matt says, "Oh, I see her," and kind of hangs up and runs off before Amy can figure out what's going on. That's when Amy realizes the store is blatantly playing mind games with them to keep them in the building, so not only do they have to run from scary-ass ghosts, but the location itself is also an antagonist, which I think is interesting and adds another layer of spookiness. Trinity breaks free and runs away from Amy deeper into the dark, spooky-ass store, and Amy does what she should have done a long time ago and makes a break for the parking lot.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
She hears Ruth Ann screaming, but she does not stop running. Honestly, I love my coworkers, but there's not a single one of them I'd fight a ghost for. There are a few I might go back into a burning building to save, but I'm not fighting a ghost. Sorry, that is out of my wheelhouse. Amy makes it outside right as the chapter ends. Chapter 13. Amy can't believe the cops still aren't there, and she passes her coworkers' cars to get into hers and take off. When I read this for the first time, I was super surprised, and I thought Amy was genuinely just leaving, but obviously she's not, or the book would just be over now. But she was running away. That's what Warden Worth's chair had taught her. She was always giving up, quitting early, walking away. It was so much easier not to try. The chair had made it so easy to surrender. No, fuck that. This is a situation where it's okay to give up. Amy turns around and goes back to help her friends. No, not her friends, but her store partners. She remembers how Basil came back for her, so she can't just abandon them. Again, call me a bad person, but I'd fully just leave. I kind of wish Amy had chosen to leave to subvert the trope of the protagonist being given an opportunity to escape and choosing to stay to help their friends instead. I hope that made sense. Like, that's a common trope. But the book would be over then if that happened, so I guess the author had to have Amy go back in the building. So Amy goes back inside spooky Ikea and runs around until she finds Ruth Ann behind the walls of a supply closet. She literally dug a hole through the drywall to find a place to hide from all the spooky ghosts. Amy felt something wrong with Ruth Ann's fingertips. They were hard like calluses, but the nails were missing and the surrounding flesh was raw. In gouging out a hole, Ruth Ann had worked her fingers to the bone. Literally, each digit ended in a bloody white tip. Gross. But this is where the book starts to lose me a little with the cheesiness. I was already annoyed that Amy didn't just leave, and Ruth Ann has been missing from the book for a little while, so this didn't really hit me like I think it was supposed to. Amy tries to coax Ruth Ann out of the wall, but right as she agrees to leave, something drags her back in. Amy dives into the hole Ruth Ann dug and scrambles to grab her as she's dragged away through like a chute or like a tunnel or something. I can't really understand what's happening behind these walls. Anyway, Ruth Ann realizes that she's not going to get away from all this, and she takes matters into her own hands. "Ruth Ann!" she yelled. Her friend didn't seem concerned at all. She was no longer resisting. She had stopped trying to fight back. "Don't you worry," Ruth Ann said. "If I can't see them, they can't see me."
You sure about that? You sure about that? That's why?
Then without hesitation, she hooked her bony fingertips into her eye sockets and raked them down her face. "No!" Amy screamed. Gross. But again, this is a little cheesy for me. It goes a little too far, which makes it more ridiculous than scary. Like, it's just a little overdone for me. Ruth is dragged off for good by the ghosts, and Amy has no choice but to leave her and try to find the others. Well, she could actually just go back to the parking lot and get in her car and leave, but whatever. In her search, Amy runs into another group of ghosts. Their faces were the worst. They were smeared, obscured, covered in a black veil, as if something had smudged their features with a dirty eraser, leaving nothing behind but indistinct knobs of shadow. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, no humanity, their individuality rubbed out. See, now this is more scary to me. These freaky-ass ghosts are kind of just standing there being freaky, and Amy has to sneak past them. I like this more than gore scenes of people gouging their own eyes out with their skeleton fingers. It's just too much. Amy finds the spooky closet tunnel again, and she decides to go inside to find the others. Chapter 14. Amy runs through the scary-ass tunnel until she finds herself in a corridor lined with prison cells, which is the Beehive. Amy swept the corridor with her flashlight, and the grates erupted with pale flesh as hundreds of hands pushed themselves through the bars, the walls alive with fingers like living hair. As Amy dashed down the hallway, they scraped across her face, her thighs, her hips, her breasts. They tried to hook her clothing and burrow through to her skin.
No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but fully fuck that. I went to a haunted house once that had like an inflatable hallway that you had to squeeze yourself through, and that was bad enough without people grabbing at me. Amy makes it through to another room where she finds something straight out of a Saw movie.
You want to play a little game?
The last room at the end of the corridor was equipped with the Mungo towel rack system. It consisted of 2 brushed steel bars, each with an attractively streamlined curve, an upper bar for large towels, and a lower thinner bar for hand towels and washcloths. It was one of the best sellers in bathrooms, and here it was with a man's body hanging from it. His wrists were bound behind him, strapped to the top bar with leather thongs. His legs were bent and his feet were crossed one over the other and tied to the lower rack, so that his body formed a grotesque sagging arc. A witiful pillowcase, dripping with dark fluids, was pulled over his head like a hood. Amy instantly recognized the shirt and pants. The figure stirred, and she heard the soft muffled sound of a bell. "Basil?" she whispered. Amy pulls off the hood and sees Basil is wearing the crazy-ass helmet from the chapter image. Nope. Fuck that. A human centipede ghost was one thing, but a crazy torture saw ghost is another. I'm out. Somehow Amy manages to get Basil free, and he's pretty fucked up. "I told you to go," he said. "When have I ever done what you told me?" Amy said. Basil made a face, and Amy couldn't tell what it was. His lips stretched tightly over his bloody teeth, and his cheeks and forehead crinkled up. She realized he was smiling. "It's responsible," he muttered. "What's that?" He cleared his throat and spat out blood. "Your shop responsible," he said. "I knew it." Yeah, no, I'd rather be alive and in one piece than shop responsible, but Amy made her choice. Amy and Basil start to backtrack their way through the tunnels, but now there's water starting to rush through. They force their way back through the hand hallway, literally getting chunks of hair ripped out as they go, which again, no thank you. They make it out of the spooky tunnel and back into the showroom, which is now starting to flood. They find one of Matt's gear bags and have more flashlights now, but before they can really come up with an escape plan, they run into the warden. The warden starts villain monologuing at them, and yet again the book takes it a little too far, which kills the creepiness. I think the other ghosts are way scarier than the warden, mostly because they don't fucking talk. Amy looked at the water on the floor and a realization dawned. "What did you do?" she asked. "You would do better to ask how I saved them. I made the ultimate sacrifice."
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
My warders took them to the basement workrooms, and we locked the doors. The ones who would not cooperate were gently shut up inside coffins so they would not disturb the others. Then I opened the sluice gates and let the river sing them to sleep as a mother takes a sick babe into her arms. "You drowned them," Amy said. When the prison was finally forced to shut down, the warden drowned the prisoners instead of freeing them, trapping them forever in the location that would one day become a spooky Ikea. Funny how those things work out. The warden monologues some more, and Amy tries to convince the ghosts that they should be on her side and fight back against the warden in like a prison uprising, but obviously that doesn't work and they swarm her, separating her from Basil as they shove her into a cabinet. Amy heard something slamming into the surface over and over. Blam, 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 blam! In the tight space, each blow was like a gunshot at point-blank range. It was the sound of nails being driven into her coffin, sealing it shut. Hammering filled the showroom floor, and the beehive was alive with the sound of toil once more.
Oh, hell no!
Oh, hell no! The warden monologue kind of killed the spookiness, and this brought it right back. This is giving that Ryan Reynolds coffin movie, I don't remember what it's called, but like, no thank you. Chapter 17. If Amy doesn't get out of this cabinet, she'll drown. Good thing she's an awesome Orsk employee. The one thing every store partner knew about Leary Pips was that customers hated them. They were bargain priced, so the store sold them in droves, but everyone who purchased one lived to regret it, and irate customers were always carting them back to returns. Assembling the wardrobe was an exercise in frustration. 4 hex screws connected the top to the sides, and fully securing them was almost impossible. Even when you did, they fell out at the slightest movement. Leary Pips on the showroom floor required constant tightening, which could only be done with Orsk's proprietary magic tool. And like all good Orsk employees, Amy carried her magic tool at all times. Okay, this fully cracked me up, and the silliness sort of kills the tension, but I don't care because it's such a good mix of comedy and horror, I'm here for it. Amy manages to get out of the cabinet in a scene that takes like 10 whole pages, so I'm not going to agonize over it here. And then she finds Basil and gets him out of his cabinet too. The water is rising too fast for them to find Matt or Trinity, so they agree they're just going to have to leave. Basil and Amy fight the current as they pretty much have to swim out of the showroom. Oh, and the water is full of rats, which obviously isn't making anything easier on them and is gross. Eventually they manage to make it to the front doors, but they won't open because of like the water pressure. Amy swims down to grab a fire extinguisher to bash the doors open, which is stupid because fire extinguishers are super fucking heavy and there's no way she would be able to swing one hard enough underwater to break the glass. Like, even if she could swing it at all, she would not be able to get any momentum, so I don't understand, like, what this plan is. Amy tries anyway and manages to crack the glass enough that it breaks, which, again, I don't understand how this is possible, but whatever. And because that glass broke, like, the pressure buildup burst everything out into the parking lot, and so all the furniture, all the rats, everything just goes flying out into the parking lot. Chapter 18. Thankfully, the police managed to find the place after all, and there's firefighters and paramedics waiting to rescue them. The Orsk corporate team shows up right in time to witness all of this chaos, and they go straight into damage control mode. Basil tells Amy that he thinks they'll probably try to sue the building contractor and claim the water was from like a broken pipe or something and not supernatural forces. As they're standing around, one of the corporate guys, Pat, gets a strange text that Amy recognizes Matt's phone number, which I don't know why, I don't have anybody's phone number memorized. This is implying that he's alive and he's somehow texting Pat for help. And it would have made more sense for him to text Basil, but they must have lost Basil's phone in the water, so I guess he had to text Pat instead. But Matt wouldn't have known that Basil's phone was lost, but like the store would know if this is actually the store trying to trick them into coming back in. I know this sounds complicated, but I just didn't really understand this detail of him texting Pat, unless it's like the store manipulating the situation. I don't know. Anyway, Pat goes back on damage control mode and tells Amy and Basil that Orsk doesn't blame them for what happened, and in fact, they were being promoted to the regional office. I don't know how Orsk could blame them for paranormal bullshit, but I guess they would have found a way. Oh, but they only get to get these regional jobs if they keep their mouth shut and don't blab to the media about what actually happened at the store that night. Pat promises he'll do right by them and Ruth Ann, and then Amy's like, hey, but what about Matt and Trinity? They were also there, and he kind of just blows her off. They were here, Amy repeated. I saw them. I dragged Trinity halfway through the store. I spoke to Matt. I'm not crazy. No one's saying you are, Pat said. But what we're wondering is that if they weren't on the clock and Basil wasn't paying them, are they really our responsibility?
Excuse me, what?
Dude, what the fuck? How evil can this guy be? Like, this is exactly what a corporate goon would say, though, which is kind of funny in a sad way, so yikes. Basil accepts the offer, which makes Amy even angrier, and she slaps Pat. We then go into an epilogue where we learn Matt, Trinity, and Ruth Ann's bodies were never found in the wreckage of the spooky Ikea, and for all her pain and suffering, Amy got a settlement of a mere $8,000. That sounds about right, unfortunately. Amy is super depressed and moves back in with her mom, living in a fog for the next 7 months. She doesn't really do much other than lay around and watch TV. Eventually, she sees that Orsk has shut down and another store has taken its place, so she immediately fills out an application to work there again. The store was different but the same. The muted color scheme had been replaced with bright primary hues. Signs that looked like an unusually literate toddler had scrawled them in crayon hung everywhere, reminding Mommy and Daddy to buy all the right things for Baby, who needed them so badly but could not yet communicate his, or her, wishes. So Planet Baby was generously interpreting them for him or her. Thank you, Planet Baby. Gross. This is somehow worse than creepy Ikea. Amy gets the job and starts working at Planet Baby, and then one day after her shift, she breaks in after closing, and she's brought a huge backpack full of supplies with her. Before she can finish breaking in, though, she runs into Basil of all people. I've been here 3 months, Basil said. Deputy Operations Manager. What's in the backpack? I have to go, Amy said, turning away. If you see me on the floor, don't talk to me. We have nothing to do with each other, you understand? I bet it's the same stuff I've got in mind, Basil said. Flashlights, batteries, pocket hand warmers. I even brought some pepper spray, although I'm not sure it'll work on those things. I was just on my way to pick it up. Oh shit, Basil's there to rescue the others too? He wasn't just an asshole who took a deal and ran away. Basil says he's seen the doors to the beehive and the ghosts are all still there, but he warns Amy that it's now extra creepy at night with all the baby stuff and tells her to avoid looking into the cribs. I don't even want to know what's in those cribs. The book ends with the two entering the store to save their friends. So that's Horrorstor. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It was a pretty good mix of comedy and horror, and I never thought about how spooky an Ikea would be after hours. The ghost prison plotline was a little convoluted and cheesy at times, but there were some genuinely freaky moments. I'll definitely be reading more from this author in the future. This video is getting long enough though, so I'll wrap it up here. I hope you liked hearing about a book I actually enjoyed for once, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!